Welcome to Every Folk Song. I'm Matt Ocamp. Says my lord to my lady as he mounted his horse, beware of long Lankin that lives in the moss. Says my lord to my lady as he went on his way, beware of long Lankin that lives in the hay. See, the doors are all bolted, see the windows all pinned, and leave not a crack for a mouse to creep in. Oh, the doors were all bolted, oh, the windows were pinned, but at a small peep in the window, long Lankin crept in. Where's the lord of this household? Cries long Lankin. He's away up to London, says the false nurse to him. Where's the lady of this household? Cries long Lankin. She's asleep in her chamber, says the false nurse to him. Where's the heir of this household? Cries long Lankin. He's asleep in his cradle, says the false nurse to him. We'll pinch him, and we'll prick him all over with a pin, and that'll make my lady come down to him. So they pinched him and they pricked him all over with a pin, and the false nurse held the basin for the blood to drip in. Oh, nurse, how you slumber! Oh, nurse, how you sleep! You leave my little son to cry and to weep. Oh, nurse, how you slumber! Oh, nurse, how you snore! You leave my little baby to cry and to roar. Oh, I've tried him with the milk, and I've tried him with the pap. Come down, my pretty lady, and rock him in your lap. Oh, I've tried him with the rattle, and I've tried him with the bell. Come down, my pretty lady, and rock him yourself. How dare I come down in the dead of the night, when there's no candles burning, nor no fires alight? You have 3 silver gowns, all bright as the sun. Come down, my pretty lady, all by the light of one. Oh, the lady came downstairs, she was thinking no harm. Long Lankin he stood, ready for to catch her in his arms. There's blood in the kitchen, there's blood in the hall, there's blood in the parlor where my lady did fall. Her handmaiden stood out at the window so high, and she saw her lord and master come a-riding close by. Oh, master, don't lay no blame on me. 'Twas the false nurse and Lankin that killed your lady. Oh, master, don't lay no blame on me. It was the false nurse and Lankin that killed your baby. Long Lankin shall be hanged on the gallows so high, and the false nurse shall be burned in the fire close by. That's the song we're dealing with here today.
Says the Lord to his lady as he mounted his horse, beware of long Lankin who lives in the moss. Says my lord to my lady as he went on his way, beware of long Lankin that lives in the hay.
Every culture has to have a boogeyman, and I'm sure you know why. I'm sure you knew why the first time you had that dream where you were running and your parents weren't anywhere nearby. You knew there was something behind you, and you didn't know what it would do when it caught up to you, but you knew you couldn't let it catch you. Or that first time you thought, what if this woman in front of me isn't my mother? She looks like my mother. She sounds like my mother. But what if it's not my mother? What if she's been replaced? What if she never was? And of course, the follow-up, If that's not my mother, what is it? Or maybe you learned it the first time you were all alone in your room at night, and you went to open the shades, just to look out and see the night, but you paused, and you don't know why you paused at first. But you pulled your hand back from the window and you changed your mind. Because what if, and you know it's ridiculous and it wouldn't be, but what if you opened that shade to look out at the empty night sky, and it wasn't the dark blue tinted gray of your yard at night you saw, but instead a face staring in the window back at you? A boogeyman is what we're dealing with here today. Long Lankin, or Cruel Lambkin, or False Lammakin, Cruel Lincoln, Rankin, or any like-sounding name combined with one of those words. It's Roud 6, Child 93. It has 208 entries in the Roud Index. The song dates back to at least before the 15th century, possibly as far back as the 13th century. And, fittingly, the origins of the song are shrouded in mystery. Its first recorded appearance was when, in 1775, two versions of the story were both presented to Bishop Thomas Percy of Ireland in a letter from Kent, and printed by Thomas Hurd the following year in 1776, the year of American independence if you're keeping track. The version we'll start with comes from the Northumbrian region of northern England. It's the version that most closely resembles the one I read at the beginning of this program. It's referred to by British folk collector Anne Gilchrist as the Border Ruffian narrative. Like basically all folk songs and stories, the details vary in almost every retelling, but I'll do my best. The song starts out with the lord of the house leaving to go somewhere, and warning the lady of the house to bolt up all the doors and lock all the windows, because Long Lankin is lurking about in the moss. And the lady of the house gets cocky and says, "What care I, because the doors are bolted and the windows are locked." But, of course, when night comes, Long Lankin does, indeed, creep in. Sometimes he creeps in through a window that only he knows about. Sometimes he coaxes the nurse to let him in. The scariest by far is that supernatural-sounding version that started this episode out, in which Long Lankin creeps in through a small gap in the window, bringing to mind this Slender Man sort of imagery. This unnaturally thin and long dark creature fitting his way in through a crack. That's the image of this whole thing that sticks with me the most, I think. So Lankin asks the nurse, who is referred to as the false nurse, because of how deeply she betrays everyone. He asks her, "Where is the lord of the house? Where is the lady? Where is the heir?" To which she replies in turn, "He's out to England, or London, or in the field, or just away. She's in her chambers, and he's in his crib." So they devise their plan together. They'll take this baby, this heir to the household, and they'll stab him with a silver pin. The child, of course, screams and cries, and this alerts the lady of the house. There's a line here about the nurse holding a silver basin for the blood to run in, but I'll return to that later. The lady calls down, asking why the nurse is so lax, allowing her child to scream, pardon the expression, bloody murder like this. And the nurse says that she's tried everything. There's nothing she can do. She tells the lady to come down and nurse him herself. Sometimes the lady points out that it's too dark, and so the nurse, confusingly, tells her to put on a shiny dress so the moon will reflect and light up the stairwell. So the lady does, and is immediately caught by Cruel Lankin. Take a second to imagine that. It's probably the worst fear of anyone who has a dark stairway in their home. The fear that when you descend it at night, just as you get to the bottom, someone from off to the side grabs you, and you're powerless. And for the lady of this tale, not only does she fall victim to bold Lankin, being held violently in his grasp, but she sees that she has been betrayed by her nurse, and she sees that her child hold on a minute. I know this is super creepy and just the worst, so I want to take a minute to ask, are you okay? This is really heavy, and I know I'm releasing this on Halloween and all, but I just want to check in on you. This is a pretty messed up folk song. I mean, we just had a guy stab a baby to lure his mother into a death trap. If you need to pause the show at any point, watch some cartoons and come back, I fully understand. Maybe it's just me that's totally upset by this song, but if you are too, I'm sorry. Anyway. At this point in the song, the lady is in the hands of the horrible and legendary Lankin. Seeing her murdered child and traitorous nurse, she often starts to plead. She offers him gold. He tells her that it won't help. In some versions, where she doesn't know that her nurse betrayed her, she, fittingly enough, betrays her nurse and offers the nurse up to Lankin. In some versions, it's her daughter that she offers, sometimes named Betsy. Lankin has two replies here. One in which he says that he'll kill them anyway, and one in which he agrees. He says that indeed she should call for them, so they can hold the basin with which to catch her blood. Nice fake out, Lankin. The next verse just describes the heinous amount of blood covering the floors, the walls, the nursery, the hallway, and then we jump forward in time to when the Lord returns. In the versions where there's a daughter, it's the daughter, Betsy, or whoever, who calls to him first. In the rest, it's another nurse, one who apparently had nothing to do with the murders. She, whichever she, calls to him as he approaches the castle and tells him what happened, begging him not to blame her. And then, in the next verse, Lankin is hung, and the false nurse is burned in a fire. Sometimes they switch the two, and sometimes Lankin is both hung and his bones are burnt in the fire. And that's the story. Why does Lankin do it? Is he a demon? Is he some psychopathic serial killer? Is there any motive of any kind? We don't know. Many have tried to figure it out. Some people suggest that Lankin was a leper, an outcast that was forced to live amongst the moss, as the song says. There was an old legend, most famously relayed, of the Pharaoh in the book of Exodus in the Bible, that said that bathing in the blood of a baby would cure one of leprosy. Many point to the silver bowl catching the baby's blood as evidence that Lankin was a leper, trying to cure himself. Others say that Lankin was the devil, taking his toll for a broken contract. Many tales have been told of the devil taking his toll for a broken contract, and this could certainly be one. But most folklorists believe that this song holds all the qualities of a story that stemmed from true events. True events that have been lost to time and will never know again. Though some still claim to. There's an unfinished castle in Whittledenay called Nafferton Hall, but it's known to many locals as Lonkin's Hall. It's in Northumbria, northern England, near Othingham. It was always unfinished, and a place unfit to house anyone, but legend has it that once upon a time it served as the home base of an infamous criminal named Lankin. Story goes that this Lankin fell in love with a servant of the large estate of Welton nearby. The two planned to rob the estate, and the story proceeds much like that of the tale of Lankin. She breaks him into the house on a night when the Lord is away to London. He murders the infant son of the Lord of Welton and then the lady. Though on the Lord's journey to London, he's overcome by a terrible feeling and turns around. As he returns home, Lankin panics and flees, taking the bodies with him. He throws them into a local natural pool called World Dub, which legend has it is a bottomless pool of water, and he hides in the trees above it. When he's discovered there, the Lord threatens to shoot him down, and in fear, he dives into the pool and never comes out again. In some versions of the legend, he hung himself. Some say he was apprehended and hanged for his crimes, but the bodies of the lady and the heir of Welton were never found. They say her ghost still haunts Welton Hall, which was built on the grounds many years later. And Lankin, a rake even in death, stalks all of Whittledenay. It's a story that mothers still to this day tell their children to keep them from wandering too far after nightfall. Even World Dub is now called Long Lankin's Hole. And further legends say that he threw a sack of gold down it as well, but that no one has ever reached the bottom to find out. Most folklorists believe this to be a false connection, that the story of Lankin and the story of Whittledenay got tangled up to make a hybrid story of the two, which seems likely as Whittledenay is not the only place to claim the tale of Long Lankin. However, there's one curious thing. I mentioned earlier in this podcast that the tale of Long Lankin is said to date back to possibly the 13th century, and it was during the 13th century when Nafferton Castle was commissioned and partially built and subsequently abandoned. And there's a record in the area of a deed. The details of the deed are fairly inconsequential, but for these two pieces. The year on the piece of paper, 1316. The name signed on the witness line, John Lankin.
Said my lord to my lady as he mounted his horse, beware of Long Lankin that lives in the moss. Said my lord to my lady as he rode away, beware of Long Lankin that lives in the hay. Let the doors be all bolted and the windows all pinned, and leave not a hole for a mouse to creep in. So he kissed his fair lady and he rode away, and he was in fair London before break of day. The doors were all bolted and the windows all pinned, except one little window where Long Lankin crept in.
Now, I have to admit something here. I'm afraid that I'm guilty of manipulating the narrative a bit. I didn't lie, and I promise that it was only in the sake of adding some creepiness and mystery. But while it is true that the motives of the character Lankin, or Lambkin, are largely a mystery, and that the origin of this ballad is unknown, we do know a bit more than I've let on. The Northumbrian version of the ballad, the Border Ruffian narrative, is not the older version. The whole song originally comes from Scotland, and in it lurks a huge clue as to what Lambkin is all about. It first popped up in printed version at the exact same time as the Northumbrian version did, in 1775, also in the letter to Bishop Percy from the Kentish clergyman, also officially printed by Thomas Hurd in 1776. And Gilchrist calls this the wronged Mason narrative. And it seems to deepen the audience's and singers' understanding of the tale by starting off with one simple line. Lambkin was as good a mason as ever laid a stone.
As ever hewed a stain. He
built Lord Weary's castle, but payment he got none. So with that one line, the only major difference between the two versions, really, we see that Lambkin was a mason who worked on a lord's castle and was never paid the way he was supposed to be. This provides a solid motive for revenge, even if the revenge we know is coming is far more bloody and heinous than the crime that started it. From that perspective, we could see this as a straight-up story of overzealous, psychotic revenge. We could also see this as a sort of tale about class warfare, a disproportionately vicious way to voice the lower classes' anger at the noble classes, and for relieving the stress of their long history of being trampled on and taken advantage of. for centuries, millennia even, of unfair treatment. But, again, even if those are very understandable motives for revenge, the stabbing to death of an infant and the bloody butchering of an innocent lady go way too far past the realm of understandable.
It's hung by his gear, and he has given yon bonny bairn a deep wound and a sear. Lankin is rocked, and the false Nazis sang, and frail cardboard o'er the cradle, the red blood ran.
The other thing the wronged Mason has is a second possible historical context. You may have noticed that in the missing verse there was a name, Lord Weary. We already talked about the English legend in Nafferton Hall, but in Scotland they have Balweary Castle. Balweary Castle was already a legendary place in Fife, Scotland. It was said to be the former home of the Scottish wizard Michael Scott. Not the one you're thinking of. This Michael Scott, 1T, was referenced in Dante's Divine Comedy as a wizard amongst the pagan prophets and witches in hell. His face, quote, turned toward his own backside, unquote, in punishment for gazing into the future while he lived. He was said to be born and live his life at Balweary Hall and command imps and demons to do his bidding. There are more legends about Balweary Castle, including a monk's curse ending the family's bloodline, and the castle still stands in ruins in Fife. But relevant to us is that many claim Balweary to be the castle that was visited on the fateful night of Lankin's cruel murders. They believe that it was Lankin who built Balweary, one of many Flemish craftsmen that passed through Scotland in the Middle Ages when the castle was built. They believe that it was Lord Weary, as they say in the song, who withheld Lankin's pay. And while the Lord was out to sea, Lankin exacted his cruel revenge. They believe that after the murders he was hung on a dole tree that still stood near the ruins of Balweary for a long time.
What cares I for Lincoln, for any?
Says my lord to my lady as he mounted his horse, beware of long Lankin that lives in the moss. Says my lord to my lady as he went on his way, beware.
With the Mason line and the knowledge that it later goes missing, you can clearly see ballad evolution at work. And that's another reason I held off on revealing this version until midway through the podcast. Because now you can see what happens when one simple piece of the puzzle is removed. Somewhere between Scotland and Northumbria, the first line, which provides all the context, must have fallen off. This was bound to happen, as most folk songs and fables were told through oral tradition, as we talk about over and over again. And you can see being the singer or storyteller receiving the story and pondering over it before you retell it. It becomes an absolute mystery. Of course you would try and invent some motive before you retell it. That's just competency in storytelling, right? Maybe this Lankin was a jilted lover, you might decide. You wrap it up in a local story about a love triangle that ended in murder, and the two become one. Maybe you're hearing about all the blood and the silver basin, and you've heard the grisly legend of leprosy remedies. You imply that Lankin was a poor leper, which anyone at the time might have inferred through contextual clues. Maybe you even add the line about the silver basin and the silver pin. Maybe you decide he's just a lowly thief. You think about the legend of that thief who lived in the ruined castle in your town, and you bundle the two up. Now you have a fully rounded legend that sticks in your village for over 200 years. It's all part of the evolution of folk. Or, in some folklorists' points of view, de-evolution, as it takes the ballad further away from its origins. But isn't that just what evolution is? Before I wrap up, and I'm aware I say that just about every episode, but I'm always building to a conclusion when I realize there's still one last version to talk about. The song reappeared, as many of these old Scottish, English, and Irish folk songs do, in the 19th century, in Appalachia, North America. Not much changes about the song, but it's an interesting version to hear. The most famous recording being this one, by Frank Prophet.
Bo Lankin was as fine a mason as ever laid a stone. He built a fine castle and the pay he got none. He built a fine castle and pay he got none. He swore by his maker he'd kill them unknown. Beware's a Bo Lankin when I'm gone from home. Beware of the Bo Lankin when I'm gone from home.
The story of Bo Lankin, or Long Lankin, or Lambkin is a terrifying one, to say the least. Whether he's a man, a wronged mason, out for revenge on a stiffed paycheck, or a jealous lover lashing out for a perceived romantic injustice, or a border ruffian, a famous thief losing any morals he had left, a leper, desperate for a cure, willing to sink to the lowest acts of barbarism and violence to rid himself of his curse, or just a psychotic serial killer. Whether he's a monster, that devil incarnate, taking his rightful payment for a severed contract, a boogeyman, acting on a moral code completely alien to us humans. Whether he existed in real life, in the Castle Balweary, or the town of Whittledenay, or whether he's simply a fable, a lesson crafted to warn others to lock their houses up tight, to warn proprietors to pay their contractors, to warn the noble classes that the working classes aren't people to be messed with, to warn children to stay in after dark, or just to scare one's friends around a campfire. Whether he met his fate, as the song and stories suggest, hanged from a dule tree, burned in a fire, plunged into a bottomless well, from which he never came back out. Or whether he was truly something more than human, and is still out there, amongst the moss, to this day. The whole thing is terrifying and uncomfortable. It not only tells a dark and disturbing tale, it dredges up some of the darkest legends and folklore from all of history. And now that I know the story, it will stick with me forever. The imagery of the moss hiding a sinister, long, dark figure. The crack in the window, the silver basin, the pin, the bones burning in the fire. And I guess that's why the song is still sung today. I suppose nothing can disappear from the culture if it's still lurking in our minds, if it's still scaring us at night, if it's still something we think about when we lock up our windows, when we're lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. I used to have a dream when I was very young. It was a dream that I had over and over, once a month at least, for years. I was in my grandparents' house at the bottom of their steps, and there was a thing behind me. I never knew exactly what it was, but I knew it was going to catch me, and after a while I would recognize the situation. I couldn't wake myself up. I'm not even sure if I knew it was a dream, but I knew I'd been here before. I'd been at the bottom of my grandparents' steps, and this thing had been behind me. The steps went up, and there was a landing, and then they went back up the other direction, and my family was often waiting at the top, waiting for me to come up the steps. Sometimes they knew that there was something evil lurking behind me, and sometimes they didn't. But they would cheer me on to come up the steps, and I would just stand there, looking upwards. Because I knew as soon as I moved, that thing behind me would grab me and pull me back down, as it had every other time. So I would pause for a while, and I'd finally get my courage up, and I'd sprint as hard as I could up the steps. I'd get up that first bit of steps, I'd get to the landing, and then suddenly something had my leg, and my hands would smack on the floor of the landing, and it would pull me back down. And I would wake up. I'd wake up in bed, and I'd be fine. I haven't had that dream in over a decade. I haven't thought about it in years. But now as I write this, and I'm sure again as I read this, yeah, I can confirm, yes, I'm reading this now, and yes, it's happening. I can feel it again. The fear in the pit of my stomach, my family upstairs, and the long, unknowable, dark figure pulling me down the stairs to him. The jolt of fear that would wake me up every time. And somehow, the fable of Long Lankin pulled it back out of the recesses of my mind. So while the song changes and mutates, while it evolves and loses pieces of itself, gaining new ones, some more reasonable, others complete nonsense, Lankin, a story that speaks to darkness and fear and mystery, isn't likely to go away. So take heed, folks, and let me say to you this as you go on your way. Beware of Long Lankin, who lives in the head. Was that corny? I can't always tell the difference between scary and corny. Whatever.
Said the Lord to the lady as he mounted his horse, beware of Long Lankin who lives in the moss. Said the Lord to the lady as he rode away, beware of Long Lankin who lives in the hay. Let the doors all be bolted and the windows all pinned, and leave not one hole for a mouse to crawl in. So he's kissed his...
Thanks as always to Steve Roud, the English Folk and Dance Society, and the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library, all for the existence of the Roud Index, which is what he used to find these songs. And thanks to the following artists: Fire and Ice, Alasdair Roberts, Frank Prophet, Steel Eye Span, Findlay Napier and the Barroom Mountaineers, The Devil's Interval, and The Hare and the Moon. Please take the time to look them up and buy their music. It's worth it. For more information on Long Lankin or Lampkin, I don't know why you want to torture yourself. But get a friend and visit the library in the daytime, or use the internet in a well-lit room with soothing music on and a pocket knife or something for protection. I also now post some citations and references in the show notes on the blog at myroudjourney.tumblr.com. Go there, follow me, do it. Thanks so much for listening. You can find me at my full name, MATTAUKAMP, Matt Allcamp, on any of the modern social networking sites, and then share this show with your friends. The blog, again, is at myroudjourney.tumblr.com. You can email me at mattallcamp@gmail.com. I really love hearing from you. And if one of those sites where you got this podcast has a review option, please review the show and give me many stars. It's not just to sate my ego, it helps a lot and no one is doing it, so please do. Be safe, lock all the doors, and make sure all the windows are pinned, and don't forget to check back in 2 weeks to hear all about the female highwayman. Take care, and happy Halloween, folks.
Bonnie, Bonnie sang the lunty, hurt o'er thorny brake, and sae grand Narcy went burned at the stake. Bonnie, Bonnie sang the lunty, hurt o'er thorny tree, and sae grand Lankin when he was content to be.
Just so you all know, I was going to put a scream here, like a really horrifying woman's scream. I had one all picked out and I was so excited, and then I thought, what if one of you was driving? I don't want to be responsible for anybody's deaths. Also, I really like you guys, so, I don't know, there's one you owe me.